Now I'm recording. It's been a while. Okay, hi. I'm nervous. I haven't done this in a while. So let's do a quick little trying to get back into YouTube, and I don't know what video to make, and so I just watched Elyse Myers do a book review of the books that she read last month. So how about I do a video about books I read last month? It's very Mean Girls of me to do the whole Regina George wore cargo pants and flip-flops, and so I'm gonna wear cargo pants and flip-flops. I've been reading some books, and I thought, what better way to get myself back into the YouTube space than reporting on some of the books that I read. I have been trying to find a way to get back into YouTube that's not awkward, and I feel like this is a good way. I have a stack of bookie books. Oh, look, I get to do this now. So I think I've been started to read, okay. I've been starting to get back into the reading habit. I wanna say the last year or so, maybe a little bit more than that. I've been doing a variety of things, from the TikTok faves to going off on my own path to doing old school books and nonfic. And so it's kind of a hodgepodge of stuff that I'm trying out. I'm still trying to find the genre that I like. I'm happy to report though that the majority of these are really, really good, with one exception. One exception of maybe not that one, but most of these are 4 to 5 star ratings for me. I'm still figuring out my rating system. I'm still learning how to give a quick synopsis of a book. So bear with me. I appreciate your patience with me as we struggle through this book recommendation / review video, but I think it's gonna be fun because I read a lot of good books this past month, and then I have 2 from July that I couldn't make a video without talking about them because I think they're amazing. So we're gonna start with those books that I read in July that I think they're so good. The first one being a book that I read for the Morbidly Curious book club that I found on TikTok. I cannot remember the name of the original creator. She leads the whole book group, but I will link all of her information down below, including the website where you can where you can sign in to be a part of the book club. It is super fun, and it's definitely as the title would say, morbidly curious books. So they're kind of, for a specific type of person, which I appreciate because I definitely am. So the book selection for the month of July was A Light in the Dark, Surviving More Than Ted Bundy by Kleiner Rubin. This is a memoir by Kathy, who was in the Chi Omega sorority house in 1978. So for those of you that may not be familiar with the Ted Bundy story, Ted Bundy was a serial killer in the 70s, and in 78, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house late at night and murdered 2 women and attacked Kathy and her roommate. And Kathy and her roommate were the only 2 that survived. And this attack at the Chi Omega house would lead to Bundy's arrest and later imprisonment and execution as well. So it's kind of a pivotal moment in the whole story of Ted Bundy. So while this book is very heavily centered on Ted Bundy and the events that happened that night in the Chi Omega house, it's so much more than that. Kathy's life is absolutely incredible. This woman is the definition of a survivor. She is this Amazonian, nothing can bring her down woman, and I find her so incredibly inspirational. I found it so riveting. Her storytelling is phenomenal, and the way she is able to articulate what she is feeling and what she experienced in such a honest, straightforward, not mincing words, I'm just gonna tell you like it is so eye-opening and just jaw-dropping. I devoured this book. I think I read it in 2 or 3 days because I just couldn't put it down. It was that phenomenal. It's really hard to talk about this story and to talk about Kathy's story without mentioning Ted Bundy, because he was A, a pivotal role in all of this, but B, there's just so much bad history when it comes to Ted Bundy, and Kathy is doing an excellent job of poking holes through this facade that is Ted Bundy. She continuously and laboriously mentions so many times how this man was not this charming, handsome, conniving, so smart and coy, mastermind that was luring these women into his clutches, and these women were simply pawns, and they were helpless and defenseless, or they were dumb and they were, you know, how could you fall for that? Like, that is so silly. So she does an excellent job of really speaking for the victims, and like I said, poking these holes through the facade that is Ted Bundy, and pointing out that, like, no, he was not what society and what history is trying to paint him to be, especially what society thought at the time. Because she was living through this, obviously. And so her experience of seeing what it was like for her in the courtroom, and to see what it was like in the newspapers, and to read what people were saying at the time, and then what people continued to say after, was just, you just want to stand up and give her an ovation, because she's brave enough to say, like, no, that's not true. It's not true at all. And we need to stop doing this. So I loved this book. I will 1000% read this book again, which is why I give it a 5-star. 5 stars for me is like, not only is it a fantastic book, but I will read it again, because that's a big thing for me. I generally don't reread books because I have so many and I get distracted, and I don't necessarily, once I've read it, I'm kind of like, okay, you're gone. I don't need to revisit that. But I think this one is definitely one that I would read again, because there are so many nuggets of truth and power, and just, it's an amazing story that I think if you can stomach it, because it does get real. It gets real and it gets graphic about her healing process and what happened to her as far as the attacks, and it's just very, very real. And the depression that she experienced is very, very real, and it's very honest, and so that could be a little bit triggering for some, so obviously be careful, but it is so good. Highly recommend. The next book that I read that I absolutely adored in the month of July was Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I love Riley Sager. I've read 3 of his books. I'm not sure how many he has, but the first Riley Sager book I read was Only One Left. I adored that book. That book is so good. And so this one came out in July, I think. And I immediately picked it up and I immediately read it, and I really enjoyed it. Ethan Marsh is returning back home to his childhood home. He lives in a cul-de-sac where there's, like, you know, several houses at the end of a street. And he's known his neighbors for years. They've lived there as long as he's been there. Like, nobody has moved, like, nobody has left. It's kind of just this solid neighborhood that was, like, built in the 80s, and, like, nobody has left. And it's just your classic, like, average American tried and true cul-de-sac setting. So he is returning home. His parents have moved to Florida. He is coming back to kind of get their house ready to sell. When he was 10 years old, Ethan and his best friend, Billy, had a summer camp out in his backyard. And when he woke up in the morning, the tent was, like, torn and Billy was gone. And ever since that day, when, you know, Ethan was 10, Billy has been missing, and nobody knows where he went. Nobody knows what happened. Body was never found. It was just this mystery that plagued his neighborhood for the rest, just from then until now. So Ethan is returning home. He's starting to get flashbacks and starting to get memories about what happened that night, because for the longest time he couldn't remember it all. And slowly he starts putting the pieces together as he interviews and talks to neighbors and continues to kind of figure out and process his trauma about what happened that night. He slowly starts to figure out what happened to his 10-year-old friend that summer, oh so long ago. In classic Riley Sager style, this is absolutely a fun and easy read. It's very action-packed, it goes very quick, and to me it was definitely something that I could pick up and put down very, very easily. It was an excellent summer read for me, because with the kids being home from school, we're going to the park, we're going to the skate park, I'm taking them here, I'm taking them there, and this for me was excellent because it was so easy just to pick it up and put it back down. You pick it up for like maybe a couple of pages and then you have to put it down real quick because it's time to go home or it's time to make dinner or whatever. There are lots of characters that are introduced into this book, and in a classic like mystery kind of way, there are some red herrings, there's some twists, you don't know where it's gonna go. All in all, I found it very, very entertaining, and it was a joy to read. I gave it 4 stars because, unfortunately, with these types of books, it's kind of hard to like say like, oh, I want to read it again, because you know how it ends. It's an excellent Riley Sager. I don't think it's my personal favorite. My personal favorite is definitely The Only One Left, but it's definitely top 3. I enjoyed it a lot. I really, really liked it, and if you're into like, you know, summer spookies, like it's a summer ween book for sure. It was just a good read. I absolutely adore it, and I really recommend it if you like mysteries and like kind of a summerween vibe. Definitely do it. That was July. Let's move into August. The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. This one is a 5-star for me. I loved it. This was my first Lucy Foley. This is a great little mystery involving the two main characters. Like, there's lots of characters, but there's two main characters. Francesca and Bella used to vacation in like this beach town area. And so one summer, Bella and Francesca's paths cross. Something happens that summer, and Bella has come back, and she has some questions to ask Francesca, and they have some unresolved issues that must be resolved. And the rest of this book is the unfurling of what happened that summer all those years ago and the aftermath. It's fantastic. I loved it. The pacing was like this. There were moments where I had to put this down and just kind of like, what just happened? It was phenomenal. I adored it. I read it so fast. This again was another great one to like pick up and put down real easy because the chapters are super short. Each chapter is a different like POV from one of the characters, because I swear there's like 6 or 7 people, maybe even a dozen or so. No, it's not that many. It's like 6 or 7 people that have like a voice in this book. And on top of that, we're also reading a journal that Bella kept the summer her and Francesca spent time together as teens. So you're kind of jumping back in time. You're seeing all these different point of views and perspectives of what's happening. It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. I adore it. I thought the ending was so satisfying. This is an example of a book that the second I finished it, I wanted to start reading it again, because there's so many little clues sprinkled throughout this whole thing. And while I could predict some outcomes and some elements, there were other things that were just completely blindsided me. I loved it. I absolutely adored it, and I would definitely read this again, so that makes it a 5-star. This was awesome. Love it, love it, love it. The next book that I read in August, it was not great, which I feel really sad about because it's Ali Hazelwood, and I love Ali Hazelwood. I've read her first 3 romance books. I haven't read her YA one yet, the chess one, but I saw this and I'm like, oh, I didn't realize she had another one come out, and so I picked it up. Regrets. Not really, because I do appreciate Ali and I like her storytelling, and I like that she uses like neurodivergent main female characters, and I enjoy that she has this beautiful approach to like figuring out what love is when you're neurodivergent, and figuring out how you love and what to love, and how do you show love for neurodivergent characters. And I really love the representation. However, this just was not it for me, unfortunately. This is a story about Rue and Eli. Rue is a biotech engineer for a food company. She grew up with food insecurity, and so now she's a biotech engineer. So she's a scientist trying to make food last, and that's her main focus. So she works for this company, which then experiences a hostile takeover by Eli's company. So Eli's company comes in to take over her company, and so obviously we're gonna butt heads, right? We've got Rue and her company, and then Eli's coming in trying to take over the company, so there's some tension. However, Rue and Eli decide to they're so attracted to each other. They're just so attracted to each other that they're just gonna secretly start dating and just having sex all the time. And that's it. And as they're having this relationship, which is purely physical, like Rue's loyalty to her company gets put on the line, and Eli's intentions with why he's taking over Rue's company is also put into question. And so some things are revealed, and now we have to question, are we going to still be in this relationship because we know things about each other now? It just wasn't for me, unfortunately. I felt like the love between these two characters was not believable, which is shocking for me. Not shocking, but just kind of like, oh. Because all the while, you know, Rue is definitely on the spectrum, and she has difficulty with expressing her feelings and knowing her feelings, and just being a woman who's neurodivergent and trying to be in a relationship while being neurodivergent. And so in the past, when Ali has had characters like this, she's done a really fantastic job of kind of bridging that gap of like, yes, we have we're neurodivergent, but we can still express and feel love in our own way. And I just did not see that in Rue at all. I didn't see or feel any kind of like, oh, this is just her expression of love. It was harder for me to get it, I guess. And also, I just didn't like Eli. I think that's why I had problems understanding Rue's attachment to Eli, because I did not like him at all. I don't like the way he has sex. I don't like the way he needs to be controlling everything. And I just didn't like it. I just didn't like it. So, you know, I'm also, caveat, I'm also very new to the romance genre. Let's also be very clear about that. So I'm still learning what kind of things I like, what things I don't like. And the kind of physical relationship that they have is definitely not something that I like. I think it's just mostly because I just don't like Eli. I didn't like him very much at all. I didn't find anything very charming about him. And it just seemed like he was just really, really, really controlling. And he just wanted to get the girl at any cost. So, not for me. I rated this a 2-star, but in reality, it's like a high 1-star, because I did finish it. But I have no desire to read it again. I have no desire to even keep it. I'm gonna donate it to one of like the little libraries in my neighborhood, because it's just kind of like, no thanks. Just kind of ignore that, which is totally fine, because the rest of the books I read for August were like stellar. I have no words. Like, I got this from the library, and then the second I finished it, I had to go to Barnes & Noble to buy it, because this is so good. There are books in the world sometimes that you read them and you think, gosh, I would do anything to have the experience of reading that for the first time again. This is one of those books that I would do anything to read this again for the first time. It's so good. The premise, the setup is phenomenal. So first off, this is written by Marcus Kliewer. I don't know. A little bit of history about this book. It actually started out as a like serial story, short story on Reddit, and then the author turned it into a novel. So this is his debut novel based off of a Reddit serial that he started some years ago, and it has been picked up to be made into a movie. So get excited. This is gonna be great. It's so good. So the premise of this is we have two women. We have Charlie and Eve. They are house flippers. They buy this like big, huge kind of Victorian farmhouse Gothic mansion in like the middle of nowhere. And they decide, we're gonna flip this house. So they're working on renovating it. They're working on flipping it. One night, and this is literally the first page. This is the first page of this book, is Eve is at home and all of a sudden she gets a knock on her door, and it's some random guy with his wife and 3 kids, 2 boys and a young girl. And he's like, hi, I used to live here. Can we tour your house? And she's like a people pleaser. And so poor little Eve is just like, I guess, like, sure. He starts talking about the house and he's like, oh, like this is so cool. And the little girl, who was about 5 or 6, is asking all these questions. She's very inquisitive. She's like taking all these notes and like asking all these like questions a 6-year-old would ask. And it's a little bit intrusive, but Eve is like, okay, this is weird, but it's getting time. Like, you guys need to go. So just as they're about to leave, all of a sudden everyone's like looking around and they're like, where's the little girl? Where's our daughter, the youngest? And everyone's like, well, I don't know. Where is she? They can't find her. And the dad is like, oh, she does this. She just randomly starts playing hide and seek. So we have to play hide and seek now. And if we can't find her, we just leave her and then she'll come out when she's ready. They're using like flashlights trying to find this little girl and they can't find her. And this is when the dad was like, oh, well, we'll just have to go upstairs and wait till she comes out. So then this family stays even longer. Meanwhile, Charlie, Eve's partner, is not home because she went out to town to get like stuff so they could paint or something like that. So Eve is trying to call Charlie. She's like, where are you? Please come home. Like, we've got weirdos in our house. Like, I need help getting these people out. Charlie's not picking up her phone. This huge storm arrives, snowstorm. So now they're snowed in. Charlie was able to make it home before the snowstorm hit, but now they're all trapped in this house. And that's the first chapter. And then the rest of the story is just a fever dream of like, what is going on? What is reality? The house, it's kind of like House of Usher, where all of a sudden the house is kind of changing and it's rooms are there, windows are there when they weren't there before. The family is weird. Eve is like, am I going crazy? Like, it's a wild ride. And the imagery in this book is so creepy. There was a moment when Eve is downstairs looking for this little girl and she sees something in the basement, and I literally had to put the book down. I'm like, nope. And I closed it. I'm like, okay, I gotta shake it off. Like, it was intense. I rarely get scared when reading books, but the imagery that was created in this story and the way that Marcus like describes the eeriness of this house is so good. Like, I get chills just thinking about it. I think it's a fantastic read. It's definitely one that you immediately want to read again the second it's over, because the twist at the end, the ending of it is like, what? And you immediately want to go back and start reading it again. And there's all these little clues throughout it as well, which I feel like if you're a Swiftie and you like little Easter eggs and you like hunting for clues and thinking about what does that mean? Does that have like a double meaning? It's awesome, because you'll have pages like this where there's like all this writing and there's all these things and there's maps and there's evidence, there's like newspaper clippings and there's like reviews and Reddit thread like postings and stuff. And then there'll be like all these just different little notes and different like findings. I feel like you could spend a while kind of dissecting everything and piecing it all together, because I feel like a lot of thought went into this, and it's a great time. It's just so much fun. The next book I have is the August book for the Morbidly Curious book club, which is Over My Dead Body by Greg Melville. I gave this a high 4-star because I don't think I would reread it. It is a nonfiction book, and so oftentimes with me personally, when I read nonfiction, it's like, oh, well, I read that. I don't necessarily have to reread it because I have that information. I don't need to reread it. However, I do think I would pull quotes from it, and I would probably anecdotally retell some of the stories that are in here, because this is a fascinating history of cemeteries in America and how we as an American society have evolved on how we memorialize those that have died. And it is so interesting. He's an outdoor journalist. Has always kind of had this, not obsession, but just a very curiosity with graveyards. And he actually had a job as a gravedigger, and he starts with his description of his experiences of being a gravedigger in his youth. And just the impact cemeteries has on him and his respect for cemeteries and how much he truly loves cemeteries. And his love for cemeteries definitely comes through in this book, and his passion, because he goes into such fine detail about several of the probably the most popular cemeteries throughout the United States. And he goes through them through like a historical timeline of how America has memorialized our dead. He starts with Jamestown and kind of goes through history of all these different cemeteries and how they evolved and how they changed and how taking care of the dead has changed. And he ends with like a really interesting question of like, what does this mean in our digital age now? When we have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, like you don't really need to have these big mausoleums and these big monuments to the dead when we have videos, we have their lives on Facebook. What does living in memoriam going to look like now as we move into the future? So good. It's so good. I loved also how he was not at all shy about talking about the injustices and the just downright sad history of marginalized communities when it comes to memorializing the dead. He talks a lot about Black cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries, poor cemeteries, and what happens to these marginalized communities when they die, and some of the tragedies and some of the unjust things that happen, which I found incredibly honest and I appreciated it, that we weren't just gonna gloss over it and that we're going to address it and we're shining a light on it. And I really, really appreciated that. And sometimes nonfiction can be a little bit dry and a little bit textbooky. I was a history major in college, and so I've read my fair share of nonfiction books, and this was very entertaining. He was very concise. He did not get too deep into the weeds about certain historical aspects. He just gave you enough so that you'd understand context without getting like really deep into like some of the things, which I appreciated because A, I already kind of knew some of it, but B, I didn't want to read a history book. So while this is kind of a history book, it's a targeted history book that I feel like did a really good job of giving you a small bit of history just to give you context so that you can understand what's happening in these cemeteries. He's also kind of funny. He's very like witty, and he makes a lot of like jokes, which kind of balances out some of the seriousness of this book. I think he did an excellent job of balancing kind of the humor, but also the severity when it comes to dying, and if you're not the majority. I loved it. Next, we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, YA thriller mystery book by Holly Jackson. I think this is pretty popular. I'm sure a lot of people know of this book, especially on TikTok, because it's quite popular on TikTok, but it's also going to be a Netflix show. I think it actually already came out. It's very fun. The main character is, I think her name's Piper, but she goes by Pip. And she has like a big project that they do their senior year. I don't know if they use it for like college applications or something, but it's some big writing project that they have to do. Like they work on it for a semester or something. And so for her writing project, she wants to be a journalist. And so she decides to solve this like crime that happened in her community a couple of years prior. Andy Bell, who was a senior in high school, was murdered. And everyone assumed it was her boyfriend, who was Sal Singh, even though there was a very small amount of evidence, and Sal did away with himself right after Andy's body was found. And so there wasn't really a confession. There was a lot of assumptions that he did it, and that just didn't sit right with Piper. She wants justice. She wants to find out what really happened, and so she does. It's very much Harriet the Spy, but like a modern telling of it. I loved it. I think it's fun. It's very like easy breezy, super good time, super fun read. It's typical like YA kind of fiction. So we've got some drama, we've got some intrigue, we've got gossip, we've got school drama and like friend drama and parent drama. But I feel like given the murder and given the main characters, like it works. It totally works. As far as the ending of it, it was satisfying. I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like, yeah, that makes sense. I buy it. I think it is delightful. It's quite charming. It's a cute little read. There are 2 more books, I think, and I probably will read them. It's good. It was very good. And like I said, I'm excited to read the rest in this series. I can't verbalize how much I loved these last 2 books. I don't know if I was just in the right frame of mind. I don't know if like just the vibes were vibing, or if I was just in the right place at the right time for these books, because I love these books. The first being The Dead Romantics. This book got up in my feels and made a little burrow and has been there ever since. I adored this book so much. It's a contemporary romance with magical surrealism. We start with our main character, who is Florence Day. She is a ghostwriter for a very prolific, famous romance novelist. She's kind of had a bad go of it. She had a very serious relationship with another author that ended very, very badly for her. Making her question the existence of romance, if it's a real thing, is it possible? Is it real? Is it for me? So because she's so depressed, she's having a hard time finishing this novel that she has to finish writing for her job. While she's being reprimanded for not finishing her book for work, her father passes away. Now, her father is a mortician, and their family owns a funeral home. So she has to go back home and do the whole funeral process. Now, the interesting thing about Florence is that she has this special skill where she can see dead people. Her father and her shared this trait where they could see ghosts. And while she's home, she meets a ghost. This ghost helps her come to the realization that romance is real and that romance is alive and that romance is very much within her grasp. I'm gonna get emotional. I love this book so much because I really loved Florence. I felt like she was a very real, a very relatable character in the sense that her relationship crumbling was so earth-shattering for her. And then dealing with the grief of her father dying. The way this book deals with grief is so comforting. It's just so comforting the way that this main character has to deal with losing her father, dealing with some family drama, and dealing with this feeling of not being enough and not being adequate because of this breakup that she had, but also because she feels like she hasn't shown up for her family the way she should have. And dealing with the grief of like, I didn't spend time with my dad before he died, and how this ghost helps her through that process, but then she helps him through his like, I'm dead and I'm a young guy and I never lived my life because I never, seized the moment. And his regrets of not living life to the fullest, and how both of them together are helping Florence move through this struggle in her life. I could not put this book down because I just wanted to keep coming back to this world and to see how Florence ended up because I cared so much about her. I had such an emotional attachment with this book that I cried so much. I cried so much in this book. I was sobbing so much when I finished this that my husband was like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? I'm like, it's just this book. It's so beautiful. Like, I lost my marbles over this book. 5-star read for me. I would 1000% read this again. The romance between the two of them also, which I think some people on TikTok were kind of like, was because it's a ghost. Like, there's a lot of pining and there's a lot of close proximity, but nothing's gonna happen because he's a ghost. And I adored that. It reminded me so much of the movie adaptation of Wives and Daughters. Whew. If you like period drama, I highly recommend. Spoiler alert, the main character, so she's living in this house with a bunch of people, and this is like set like in the 1800s, and there's a break of scarlet fever, and she's never had it, so she has to leave the house. And so her love interest is still in the house, and scarlet fever is like, they're going through the virus. And so they meet up like outside the home, and that's where he proclaims his love to her, and that's where they like proclaim their love to each other, but they can't approach each other. They can't do anything about it because of the scarlet fever. And so they're telling each other that they love each other, and it's like raining. It's so romantic. It's like raining, and there's big emotions, and there's swelling of music, and they have to stay like 3 or 4 yards apart from each other. And it's so romantic. And so that is this idea of like, we care so much for each other, but we can't be together. Oh, I love it. It was so delicious. It was just delicious. At the very end of this book, Ashley Poston has like this little like a behind the book little sequence. It's not really an interview. It's just kind of like her thoughts about writing this book. And in it, she says, I read because I want to be held, not like literally by a book, that would be weird, but metaphorically. I want to sink into a novel. And for me, she succeeded in doing that. This book feels like a nice warm hug, and it's just toasty, and you feel so safe. I love this book. I love it so much, and I think she has more. I want to say that The 7-Year Slip is another popular one by her, and then she had one that just came out. I can't remember what it's called, but I'm definitely on board for reading another Ashley Poston probably this month because I adored this one so much. Abby Jimenez. Abby Jimenez, Just for the Summer. Another 5-star book for me. This one hits with a hammer, and I love it. So this is about our two main characters are Emma and Justin. And they have this quirk about them, which is every single relationship they've been in always ends. And as soon as it ends, their significant other that they were with instantly gets married. They decide, well, let's just pretend to date each other. That way, when we when we break up, like the curse will be broken and the next person we date will be the person we married. It turns real and they start having feelings for one another. But Emma has a history. Emma comes from a very difficult past. She has a very, very, very toxic mother, a very unreliable mother, and a very neglectful mother. And so Emma has some deep-seated childhood trauma that comes up and must be dealt with because of the relationship she has with Justin. So this book deals a lot with childhood trauma. It deals a lot with child neglect. It deals a lot with just feeling unworthy of love because of the parents you were raised by. I found this book incredibly healing because of the character of Emma, because of her experience of being neglected as a child, of dealing with toxic parents, of dealing with trauma, and now trying to find love and trying to be loved and trying to accept that love and also know what love is. Like, it was healing and beautiful and just phenomenal. It was just so good. And, you know, Justin also has his struggles too. He just recently became the guardian of his siblings because his mother is going to jail. So there's a lot of mommy issues in this book. And so for some that may be a bad thing, but for others it is a good thing. And for me, like I said, I found this book very healing. I found it very soothing and calming and just very like it was a stress reliever for me. There were moments where I was a little bit slow and it kind of like meandered a little bit, but with it being a contemporary romance and being more of a character study and less of a let's just see how quickly they can have sex, I appreciated it so much because it genuinely was like a character-driven story and it wasn't just about their physical connection. So I loved it. It was so good. And that's it. That's all I've read, which is a lot. I'm very proud of myself. Like, look at all these books I'm reading. But I have to hoof it. I gotta go get my daughter from school. I had so much fun talking about books. I'm definitely gonna make another video and very soon. Thanks so much, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.